We're selling your house, Aunt Margaret. The kids need money for college, and frankly, you're too old to live alone anyway. My nephew David said this on Thanksgiving, at my own dining table, while I was still holding the turkey platter. I stood there, frozen, the steam rising from the golden brown turkey I'd spent all morning preparing. Around the table sat David, his wife Lisa, and their 2 teenagers who wouldn't even look up from their phones. This was supposed to be a family dinner, a celebration. I don't understand, I whispered. This is my home. I've lived here for 30 years. Lisa dabbed her mouth with a napkin, not meeting my eyes. Margaret, be realistic. You're 72. What if you fall? What if something happens? We're doing this for your own good. We've already talked to a real estate agent, David continued, cutting into his turkey as if we were discussing the weather. Market's hot right now. Your place could fetch maybe $400,000. We'll set aside enough for a nice assisted living facility. The rest will cover tuition and… You've already talked to an agent? My hands trembled. About my house? Don't be dramatic. Lisa's voice had an edge now. David is your only family. Someone has to make responsible decisions. I set down the platter slowly, carefully, though my whole body was shaking. I make my own decisions. I'm not selling my house. David sighed heavily. The way you'd sigh at a stubborn child. Aunt Margaret, you're not thinking clearly. That's exactly why we need to step in. We've consulted with an attorney about getting power of attorney. Given your age and, well, your recent forgetfulness. What forgetfulness? My voice came out sharper than I intended. You called me twice last Tuesday asking what day it was, Lisa said sweetly. And you forgot we were coming for Thanksgiving until I reminded you yesterday. That was a lie. A complete lie. I'd been preparing for this dinner all week. I started, but David cut me off. Look, we're not the bad guys here. We're trying to help. But with or without your cooperation, this is happening. You can either work with us or against us, but the outcome will be the same. I looked at my nephew, the boy I'd helped raise after my sister died, the child I'd paid for summer camps and school supplies and his first car, the man who now sat in my house, eating my food, telling me I was too old, too forgetful, too much of a burden to deserve my own home. Get out, I said quietly. Excuse me? Get out of my house. My voice was steady now, cold. All of you, leave. David laughed. You're proving our point, Aunt Margaret. This emotional instability. Now, they left, but not before Lisa whispered loudly enough for me to hear. She's losing it. This is going to be easier than we thought. I stood in my empty dining room, looking at the untouched Thanksgiving feast, and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was weak, because I was terrified. David was a lawyer. He had money, connections, power. What did I have? I was just a retired nurse living on a pension. If he really wanted to take my house, could I stop him? That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my life, everything I'd worked for. This house wasn't just property. It was where I'd raised my own daughter before cancer took her. It was where I'd tended my rose garden every spring. It was where I'd built my life, piece by piece, after losing everyone I loved. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed help. Real help. Legal help. The problem was, I didn't know any lawyers. Didn't trust them much either, after watching my nephew become one. But I remembered reading about a free legal clinic downtown that helped seniors. It wasn't much, but it was something. Friday morning, I took the bus to downtown Portland. The address led me to a small office tucked between a coffee shop and a dry cleaner. The sign read, Community Legal Services of Oregon, Elder Law Division. The waiting room was crowded, elderly people with worried faces clutching folders and documents. I added my name to the list and settled in to wait. Margaret Chen? I looked up. A young woman with a clipboard smiled at me. The attorney will see you now. She led me down a narrow hallway to a modest office. And that's when I saw him. The man behind the desk looked up, and our eyes met. He was tall, maybe mid-40s, with graying temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Something about his face seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. Miss Chen? I'm Dr. James Park. Please, Have a seat. He stood, extending his hand. Doctor? I shook his hand, confused. I thought this was a legal clinic. It is. I'm a physician, but I volunteer here once a week helping with medical-related cases. When I saw your name on the list, he paused, studying my face. Do you remember me? I looked at him closely. There was something in his eyes, something warm and familiar. But I'd cared for so many patients over 37 years as a nurse. I'm sorry. Street Vincent Hospital, 1985. The emergency room. There was a car accident. My heart stopped. The little boy. I was 5 years old, he said softly. My name back then was Jamie Park. My parents were Korean immigrants. They died in that accident. The memory flooded back. A rainy November night. The ER chaos. The small boy with blood on his face, screaming for his oma, his appa. Everyone was focused on the critical adult patients, but I'd seen him, terrified and alone. I'd stayed with him, held his hand through the examinations, the stitches, the terrible moment when the doctor told him his parents hadn't survived. When social services couldn't come until morning, I'd sat with him all night, singing Korean lullabies I'd learned from a colleague, even though my accent was terrible. You stayed with me, James said, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't have to. Your shift had ended, but you stayed. You held my hand when they told me I was alone. You brought me hot chocolate from the vending machine. You told me that even though the worst thing had happened, I would be okay, that I was strong, that my parents would want me to be brave. Tears streamed down my face. I remember. You were so small, so scared. You saved my life that night. Not medically, the doctors did that. But you saved me from drowning in that fear. You were the first person who made me believe I could survive. He reached across the desk, taking my hand. I've been looking for you for 20 years. I tried finding you through the hospital, but you'd retired. No forwarding information. I never gave up, though. And now you're here. I couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. Tell me what's wrong, he said gently. Tell me why you're here, and I promise you, I will help. So I told him everything. About David. About the threats to take my house, about the lies claiming I was forgetful and incompetent, about how alone I felt. James listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he sat back, his jaw tight. This is elder financial abuse, he said. It's a crime, and it's more common than you think, especially when family members try to exploit elderly relatives. He opened a folder. I need to ask you some questions. Have you given David access to your bank accounts? No, never. Has he ever asked you to sign documents? Power of attorney paperwork, perhaps? I frowned, thinking. Last month, he brought me some papers, said they were just updates to my will, making sure he was listed as my healthcare proxy in case of emergency. I signed them. James's expression turned grim. Do you have copies? He said he'd file them and send me copies. But I never received them. Margaret, I need you to trust me. I'm going to make some calls. I have a friend who's an attorney specializing in elder law. But first, I want you to go home and look through your files. Any documents David has ever given you, any statements, checkbooks, credit cards. Bring everything to me. I don't have much money for an attorney. You won't need it. Consider this a favor 20 years in the making. He squeezed my hand. You didn't leave me alone when I needed you most. I won't leave you alone now. Over the next 2 weeks, James became my guardian angel. His attorney friend, Sarah Martinez, discovered that David had indeed filed for emergency conservatorship, claiming I was mentally incompetent and financially vulnerable. He'd even submitted a letter from a doctor I'd never seen, stating I had early-stage dementia. It was all fabricated. Sarah also found something else. David had been slowly draining my savings account, the one I'd added him 2 years ago just in case of emergencies. Over the past year, he'd taken nearly $40,000 in small withdrawals, always just under the amount that would trigger bank alerts. He's been planning this for a long time, Sarah told me in her office. James sat beside me, his hand on my shoulder. He groomed you, made you trust him, added himself to your accounts, then started stealing. When you had less money, he could argue you couldn't afford to maintain your house. Classic financial abuse pattern. I felt sick. What can we do? We fight back, James said firmly. We have evidence of the unauthorized withdrawals. We have proof the medical letter is fraudulent. We file a police report for fraud and elder abuse. We request a hearing for the conservatorship and expose what he's done. But he's a lawyer. He's a small-time lawyer who handles real estate contracts, Sarah interrupted. I've been practicing elder law for 15 years, and I've taken down bigger predators than your nephew. Trust me. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for December 15th. I was terrified. What if the judge believed David? What if they really did think I was incompetent? The night before the hearing, James came to my house with dinner Korean takeout from a restaurant he owned a part of. Over bulgogi and kimchi, he told me his story. After his parents died, he'd been raised by his aunt in Seattle. She'd been kind but strict, pushing him to excel in school, to honor his parents' memory. He'd become a doctor, specializing in emergency medicine because of that night in the ER with me. I wanted to be the person who stayed, he explained, who didn't leave people alone in their darkest moments. You showed me what that looked like. He'd married, had 2 kids, a daughter, Emily, who was 16, and a son, Lucas, who was 14. His wife, Grace, was a teacher. They lived in Lake Oswego, comfortable but not wealthy. He'd achieved his dream, but I never forgot you, he said. Every Thanksgiving, I'd tell my kids about the nurse who held my hand, who made me feel safe when my whole world had ended. I'd show them the picture. Picture? He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. It was old, grainy, but I recognized it a Polaroid one of the other nurses had taken that night. Me sitting in a chair, little Jamie asleep in my lap, his head on my shoulder. The social worker gave this to my aunt. I've kept it my whole life. It's the only photo I have from that night. The only proof that someone cared. I sobbed then. For the little boy who'd lost everything. For the woman I'd been, who'd just tried to help. For the strange, beautiful circle of life that had brought us back together. The hearing was intense. David showed up with his own lawyer, looking confident, almost smug. He presented his case. I was forgetful, financially irresponsible, unable to care for myself. He had witnesses Lisa and a neighbor I barely knew who claimed I'd seemed confused at the grocery store. Then Sarah stood up. She presented bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals. She presented testimony from my doctor, my real doctor, stating I was cognitively sound and healthy for my age. She presented the fraudulent medical letter and proof that the doctor who supposedly signed it had never treated me and had reported his signature stolen. Finally, she presented James. Your Honor, I'm Dr. James Park, emergency medicine physician at Providence Portland Medical Center. I've known Miss Chen for 40 years. She saved my life when I was 5 years old. And I can attest to her character, her competence, and her mental clarity. What her nephew is doing is textbook elder financial abuse, and I've filed a police report supporting that claim. David's face went white. The judge looked at David with pure disgust. Mr. Chen, not only am I denying your petition for conservatorship, but I'm issuing a restraining order. You are not to contact your aunt, approach her property, or access any of her financial accounts. The evidence of fraud and elder abuse will be forwarded to the district attorney's office. This hearing is adjourned. It was over. Outside the courthouse, David tried to approach me. Aunt Margaret, please, I can explain. Stay away from her, James said, stepping between us. You heard the judge. This is over. You don't understand, David pleaded. We needed the money. We're drowning in debt, the kids' tuition. So you decided to steal from a 72-year-old woman who helped raise you? James's voice was ice. You disgust me. Security escorted David away. I watched him go, feeling nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just emptiness. Where family used to be. You okay? James asked gently. I don't know what I am, I admitted. Then let me tell you what you are, he said. You're free. You're safe. And you're not alone. 3 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, James insisted I come to his house for dinner. I'd protested I didn't want to impose, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. His home was beautiful, filled with warmth and laughter. Grace welcomed me like family, and the kids were wonderful, curious, kind, full of life. Emily played piano, Lucas showed me his science project, and Grace made an incredible feast. After dinner, James stood up, tapping his glass. Everyone, I want to make a toast. 40 years ago, when I lost my parents, I thought I'd lost everything, but a nurse named Margaret Chen showed me that even in the darkest moments, there are people who care. She stayed with me when she didn't have to. She held my hand when I was terrified. She gave me hope. He turned to me, eyes glistening. Margaret, you gave me a gift that night that I can never repay, but I want to try. Grace and I have talked, and we'd like to ask you something. Grace came to stand beside him, smiling. We have a guest house in the back. It's just sitting empty. It has a kitchen, a bedroom, a garden space. We'd love for you to live there, not as charity as family. We want you close. We want the kids to know you. We want you to be part of our lives. I couldn't breathe. I have my house. Keep it, James said. Rent it out. Sell it. Whatever you want. But please, consider this. You gave me family when I had none. Let me return the favor. Emily came over, took my hand. Please say yes, Miss Chen. Dad's told us so much about you. We've always wanted to meet you. I looked around at these beautiful people, this family that wanted me, and I thought about my empty house, the loneliness I'd grown so accustomed to, the nephew who'd betrayed me. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'd love to. That was 8 months ago. I'm writing this from my little guest house, looking out at the rose garden I've planted. Lucas helps me weed on weekends. Emily brings me tea when she's studying. Grace and I cook together, swapping recipes and stories. James stops by every evening after work, just to check on me. Sometimes we sit in comfortable silence. Sometimes we talk about medicine, about life, about the strange ways fate works. I sold my old house. The money is safely in a new bank account that only I can access. David was charged with fraud and elder financial abuse. He took a plea deal in probation. I don't speak to him. I don't want to. But I've gained something more valuable than I lost. I've gained a family. Not by blood, but by choice. By kindness repaid. By a little boy I held one night 40 years ago who never forgot, who spent 20 years searching for the nurse who made him feel safe. Last week, Emily asked me to teach her Korean lullabies, the same ones I sang to her father that terrible night. As I sang them to her, teaching her the words I'd learned so long ago, I realized something. That night in the ER, I thought I was just doing my job, being kind to a scared child. I never imagined that one small act of compassion would come back to save me when I needed it most. They say what goes around comes around. I've learned that's true, but not always in the ways you expect. Sometimes, the child you comfort becomes the man who saves you. Sometimes, the kindness you give comes back multiplied. Sometimes, when you lose family, you find something better. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens leads to the best thing. David was wrong about one thing. I'm not useless. I'm not too old. I'm not a burden. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, surrounded by people who chose to love me, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that, I've learned, is the truest kind of family there is.